Hello, my name is William Amos. I want to thank the 518 Memorial Foundation for inviting me to speak at the 2020 Gwangju Asia Forum. It's such an honor to be here in the virtual presence of so many heroes of Gwangju, people who put their lives and reputations on the line for the sake of democracy in Korea. Their stories are shocking, enthralling, an essential part of your history. So I'm wondering, why am I here? Unlike some other speakers here, I never rendered aid to an injured protester, never translated for a foreign journalist, never willingly participated in a demonstration. I wasn't even in Gwangju during the uprising. I was cooling my heels up near Seoul, wondering what the hell was going on down there. What I want to share with you today is the other side of activism. The experience of ordinary people who were purposely left in the dark about the terrible events in Gwangju and much of South Cholla province. This is me. I was born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin, and a Peace Corps volunteer in South Korea from 1979 to 1980. I was stationed in Mokpo, down south in South Cholla province, and Anyang, working at city health centers in tuberculosis control. Currently, I'm working as a medical writer in Boise, Idaho. My wife is Yi Yun Ye, and we have 2 married sons. I'm also the author of The Seed of Joy, an English language novel about 518, which is available in paperback and on Kindle at Amazon. For those of you who don't know, the Peace Corps is an independent agency run by the United States government that provides volunteers in providing international social and economic assistance to developing countries. It was active in South Korea from 1966 to 1981. The programs included tuberculosis control, Hansen's disease, otherwise known as leprosy, special education, TEFL, maternal and child health, and vocational education. The volunteer population in Korea in 1980 was 156, and our sites were located all over the country. Our headquarters in Seoul was in Gwanghwamun. This is in walking distance to the Capitol building, later the National Museum, which was torn down a couple decades ago, the U.S. Embassy, which is on the main street there, and City Hall Plaza, which is where a lot of the demonstrations took place in Seoul just prior to 518. When we arrived in Korea, we volunteers were given some basic rules of conduct. Don't participate in the political controversies of your host country. Stay away from political demonstrations and riots. Don't share foreign news articles with Koreans. Stay politically neutral. In conversation, tell your friends that your views are personal and do not necessarily reflect the policies of the United States. Be careful who you talk to. The KCIA, the Korean Central Intelligence Agency, often goes undercover. They distrust Peace Corps volunteers. And finally, know the location of the nearest U.S. military base and be prepared to go there in an emergency. Now, I, like every volunteer I knew, broke most of these rules at least once. What part did I play in the Gwangju Uprising? Not much. I wasn't in Gwangju at the time. I was in Seoul and Anyang. I did experience a major demonstration firsthand in Seoul on May 15th, 1980. And I was largely ignorant of the huge events that were taking place in Jeollado at the time that they happened. I was affected by the lack of news that covered Korea, but not the rest of the world. But even so, I had some sources of information that were available to me, and I kept my eyes open. I was fooled many times, just like everybody else. This is how Peace Corps volunteers stayed informed while they were in country. The Peace Corps provided us with the news magazine subscription of our choice, either Time or Newsweek. These magazines were mailed to our work site every week, and uncensored versions of these magazines were posted at the Peace Corps office in Seoul. We also had access, of course, to local English language newspapers, the Korea Times and the Korea Herald. But something was missing from those articles, those magazines that we got. Everything that had anything to do with the unrest in Korea was removed by the government censors. If these stories were short, they were blacked out with a marker pen, but if they were long, whole pages were ripped out. The first big event that I experienced during my time in Korea was 10/26/79, which was the date that President Park Chung-hee was assassinated. I was in Seoul the night it happened, and when I woke up the next morning, Seoul was eerily quiet. It seemed strange, even on a Saturday morning. Downtown Seoul was usually bustling with activity and full of noise. But we had no clue what was going on behind the scenes. The initial reports were that President Park was accidentally shot. He was caught in the crossfire between two of his aides at a dinner party. Newspapers and even international news magazines echoed the government story at first. Strangely enough, my parents knew more than I did about what was going on. That's what they saw on the cover of their Newsweek magazine. I don't have the cover of the magazine that I saw, but I assure you it wasn't this. Next, after a long spring of growing unrest under General Chun's martial law command, this happened, the large demonstration in Seoul. This is one that I actually experienced. This was a few days before the Gwangju Uprising. I was taking the bus from Anyang to Seoul, and as we passed Seoul Station, we saw this huge rally, the rally that preceded the major demonstration that happened later in the day. These are pictures that I took. And this is what happened. This is my first taste of what a large demonstration was like. I was kind of stuck in the middle of it. The clashes with riot police went back and forth all afternoon and lasted well into the evening. My only goal during all this time was to get out of the way and to avoid the tear gas that was blowing everywhere. It literally took my breath away. Finally, on May 18th, a few days later, the uprising in Gwangju began. These are photos that have since become widely distributed in books, news articles, and other media. At that time, and for many years to come, they were closely guarded secrets because they showed the true nature of the conflict. And you don't need me to tell you how brutal all of these actions were on the part of the government paratroopers. What did the rest of the country know about it? Well, not much. It's been said that truth is the first casualty of war. And the authorities made sure that the behavior of the paratroopers did not reach the public outside of Gwangju. There was a measure called Operation K that I just found out about recently, It was an effort by the press measures team of the Defense Security Command under General Chun to manipulate public opinion by controlling the press. And to this end, censorship was an essential tool. The aim was to, quote, stabilize misguided public opinion, asking for democracy through the press. And they also did that by winning over leading journalists and getting leading figures in newspapers and broadcasters on their side. So what did Peace Corps volunteers know about all of this? Well, there were several, like Paul Cartwright, David Dollinger, Judy Chamberlain, and Tim Warnberg, who knew a great deal, actually, because they were seeing the events with their own eyes. It was happening all around them. And some of these stories you're hearing at this forum. The rest of us around the country, especially those of us not in the Chalo provinces, knew only a little more than the Koreans actually did. And what did the rest of the country know? They knew only what the Martial Law Command chose to tell them. The members of the resistance, apparently according to the Martial Law Command, were hooligans and rioters who were using violence against the government. They were impure elements and followers of Kim Dae-jung. These were the terms of art that they used to label these people. The reports of the atrocities committed by the government troops were malevolent rumors. However, North Korea was poised to attack South Korea during the unrest in Gwangju. And this is rather ironic because rather than truth disguised as a rumor, this was a rumor disguised as truth. And what did the rest of the country know about it? These are quotes from news stories that were put up under the authority of the Martial Law Command. 600 students started the demonstration, and due to wild rumors exacerbating local sentiments, enraged citizens joined the demonstration. As of the morning of the 21st, 5 policemen and soldiers and 1 citizen were dead, 34 police and soldiers wounded. The soldier was killed when a car was rammed into him. A peaceful demonstration was disrupted by a considerable number of impure elements and hooligans from other regions. And finally, after it was all over, life returns to normal in Gwangju. Government to show maximum leniency. Yeah, I know. Did North Korea attack? No. At first, I believed the stories about the imminent attack from North Korea, but most of the volunteers and people in the know were seriously doubtful. This is from a letter that I wrote to my parents on the 20th of May. Concerning the DMZ action, my friends say that it's a bunch of bull made up by the government, since anyone can see that the U.S. military base in Seoul is not on any kind of alert, as they would be if there really were trouble. These incidents at the DMZ just have a way of popping up whenever national unity is stressed by the government to counteract demonstrations. There had been a widely circulated rumor last week that the North Koreans were planning to take advantage of the unstable situation in the south and launch a big attack sometime between May 15th and 20th. Well, it's the 20th now, and we're still here. Meanwhile, life in Anyang went on pretty much as usual. I was working at the health center, registering tuberculosis patients, doing lab tests, training student nurses, and so on. And I also had time to go on trips to local attractions like the Korean Folk Village, as if nothing had been happening in Gwangju. I had some extra news sources that I relied on from time to time. And first of all, the fellow volunteers who were closer to the conflict. People like Paul and Tim Warnberg and Dave Dollinger. I eventually did meet up with most of them after the uprising was over and managed to talk with them to find out what had actually happened. The door of the Peace Corps Lounge in Seoul, in the office, the staff managed to get their hands on uncensored news articles and posted them on the door for any volunteer to read. We were strictly forbidden to make personal copies because they knew that we would have distributed them to our Korean friends. And occasionally, non-Peace Corps world travelers, as we called them, showed up at our door to read the articles. It wasn't a very comfortable situation because we didn't know who they were and who they worked for, if anything. The Peace Corps staff put it into it. There were former volunteers who stayed in country. Some were teachers and college professors, and they had insights into what was going on in the student movement. But best of all, we had care packages from home. I asked my family and friends to clip all the articles they could find about Gwangju and the situation in South Korea and mail them to me. It's almost a miracle, I think, now that I look back on it, that most of these envelopes arrived at my health center without being opened by the police. Once I got these articles out and started showing them around, I became very popular among the Korean friends that I trusted. One of these friends was Miss I did break a rule with her and with a few other people. I actually did share one of my packages of clippings with her. This is from my journal entry on June 18th. I met Miss who talked straight about her feelings toward martial law command. Hates Chun and Che, thinks it bad that U.S. appears to support them, was horrified at the picture of Gwangju in Newsweek. This was an interesting meeting that she and I had at dinner one evening. She was sitting across the table from me. She looked from side to side, leaned in close, and said, "I hate General Chun. I hate President Che." That level of candor was unusual, especially as expressed to a foreigner like me. So I did trust her. So what are my lessons from the Gwangju Democratic Uprising? Well, the general lessons of the uprising are well known, but I'd like to point out some of the lessons that support free and accurate information as a basis for democracy. The people in Gwangju suffered and died for democracy. The people outside of Gwangju suffered too. Oppression wears many hats. The violence done to the bodies of the citizens of Gwangju is mirrored in the violence done to the truth that the rest of the country witnessed. So the Korean people, who were uninformed, just like the rest of us, suffered in the dark through misinformation and the lack of information. I believe an independent free press that covers the news without fear or favor is essential to democracy. And to this end, I found an interesting quote by Marvin Kalb, who is a longtime, well-respected journalist in the United States. In a book he wrote, Enemy of the People, Trump's War on the Press, the New McCarthyism, and the Threat to American Democracy. He said, "What I've learned over the years is that only a free press can truly protect us from an authoritarian government. Only a free press can ensure continuation of a vibrant democracy. The two are inseparable. So yes, the truth about Gwangju eventually came out. It changed Korea and the world. And despite the loss of life and trauma that occurred in Gwangju in 1980, I think in the end the world is better for it. The United States certainly has a lot to learn from Gwangju's story. And with that, I bid you goodbye and thank you for your attention.